So this is cluster 3, assessment task 5, and we're just going to talk through the questions here, and this is more to do with the Australian healthcare system and the nurse's role within it. So looking at question 1, we've broken this down into multiple parts, but the first part we want you to look at is an overview of the Australian healthcare system and what it's made up of, the components of the Australian healthcare system and its structure, and that's 100 words. Then we want you to look at this article. We've provided an article that we think might help answer B, C and D, okay? So you can see there that it's 300 words and it's from a recent newspaper article, and it does in this article talk about social, political and economic issues specific and talking about well-being and healthcare. So let's have a look at this document, and all you need to do is just to make it bigger. You just do that and maybe make it 50%. You could make it a bit bigger if you wanted. Maybe I'll make it 50%, depending on what you can, what you can read. So here in this article, you just have a little read over it, okay? And then if we go back to the document, it asks you to 100 words for B, C and D. We just want you to look at social issues that may affect healthcare. Some things they talk about in the article that are social issues, and we want you to talk about it in 100 words and how it might affect healthcare. And there's some political discussion in there around political parties and how political parties and issues affect healthcare. And then there's some discussion in there around economics. So we're talking about the way money comes in, comes out as the country as a whole, and what makes more money. And we'll talk about a little bit about this in class. But we want you to just have a little look at those 3 things: social, political and economic issues and how they affect healthcare, okay? Then in the last 2 parts, E and F, we want your opinion, okay? So 100 words for E and 100 words for F. You can see it's 200 words. We want you to talk about what's great, what's the strength of the Australian healthcare system, and then tell us what are some of the weaknesses of the Australian healthcare system. Maybe you could use some of your own experiences of what you think are the not so great things about the Australian healthcare system, and or based on some of the things you've already started reading or understanding about that I know that is in session 45, or the online session 45, okay? So then question 2 here, it's asking you to research, okay? Research and define what a service model and a standard of care is, okay? So this is sort of 2 parts. We want you to research what is a service model in healthcare, nursing and healthcare. So to kick you off, you could just go in and have a little, there'll be some paths in your Foundations of Nursing book that you can use, and there will also be information in there that you can use for the first question. So again, for all of these questions, start with using your Foundations of Nursing book, okay, as a way of finding information. You could also do service models in healthcare, okay? See, look, it's come up already, service delivery models in healthcare. And then you need to look through it and think about what we're learning about in class, and see if you can apply that to the question. Okay, what is a service delivery model? Okay, let's go back to the question. What is a service model? And then give us an example. Okay, so remembering we want a service model in relation to healthcare. Okay. And then we want you to look up what's a standard of care? Standard of care in nursing and healthcare. And if you remember, I told you very early on to save national and quality healthcare standards. Okay. And you'll recognise this. Okay, talk about this lots, and we talked about it lots in relation to, so these are all the standards, and there's 8 of them. The book, your Foundations of Nursing book, has 10 listed, but that's outdated. Okay, this is the new standards, and they've condensed them down to 8. So pick one of these standards, have a little look into it about what it is, and explain it. Okay, how is it applied? How is one of those standards of care applied? Okay. Number 3, through looking through some of how the healthcare system works in your primary, secondary, and tertiary frameworks, you'll have noticed that in there's some descriptions of lots of other ways that you access health needs and services, and some of them are non-Western approaches. So we want you to just describe some of the non-Western approaches to how you stay well and healthy. Okay, so that would be things that you wouldn't find at a hospital, but they contribute to health and well-being. Okay, question 4, what is the primary health care framework? And provide an example of the framework in action. Okay, so again, online session 45 kicked this process off, and we discussed it in class face-to-face session 47. Okay, and we talked about it again in session 52. So you'll have to have a little think about what is it, what is primary health framework, and then what's an example of it. Okay, question 5, describe who is the multidisciplinary team and what does this collective team do? 2 to 3 sentences. Okay, so again, use your Foundations of Nursing book, and the other word that can be used here, which is interchangeable with multidisciplinary, is interdisciplinary. Okay. Then from online session 45 and from session 47, face-to-face 47, we've spent some time, and also that tute 48, we spent some time talking about the evolution of nursing. Okay, so we want you to, in 150 to 200 words, describe how nursing has changed over the years, describe its evolution, what's the same as what it was in the beginning, and what's different from the beginning. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. Briefly describe the roles of the NMBA, Nursing Midwifery Board of Australia, and the ANMF. Okay, describe their role. And we again started to go through that in classroom 47, online session 50, and classroom session 52. So question 8, how is the public system funded and how is the private system funded? So that's 2 to 3 sentences, and again we kicked that off at the beginning of cluster 3, which is online session 45. Question 9, how would you explain to a client their possible healthcare choices if they were to have hip replacement surgery? So what would it look like for them if they were a public patient? What would it look like for them if they were a private patient? You're going to explain that. Question 10, now that you've got more of an understanding of the structure of the healthcare system and how members of society interact with it, we're going to break this into 2 parts to question 10. So 150 to 200 words, we want you to describe how health and illness might affect different groups within society. Okay, low socioeconomic background, for example, how does health and illness look? What does it look like for them? And what does it look like if they're maybe from a cultural, different cultural background? What does health and illness look like for people who live remotely? So you might consider these different groups and what accessing health services looks like for them, and if they become ill, what does that look like for them? That's what you're describing. We've got not many words there, and that's a lot to consider. So we're just roughly giving you a word count so you don't go too over the top. Okay, we want you to keep it succinct. And question B, the second part of this, question B, research various health policies from major or minor political parties, state and federal, and identify policies relevant to the areas that you might have mentioned in here, these groups that we mentioned. So an example might be, what is happening in the health space? What is the Liberal or Labor Party or the Green Party saying that they will do to help people who live remotely to access health and well-being? What's their health policy around remote areas? What's their health policy around people who are from a low socioeconomic background or who are unemployed, who are on benefits? What is their health policy around perhaps new arrivals, refugees, people from different backgrounds? How are they? How are their policies, health policies, specific to address the needs of people from different cultural backgrounds? Okay, and again, this is a small word count, but you could just pick one and describe it. And again, you could talk about the state government policies, or you could talk about the federal government policies. That's up to you. You just pick one, pick something, and talk about it with that lens. Question 11, briefly describe the basis of the following nursing theories. And again, in your foundations book, they start to talk about nursing theorists. And Florence Nightingale was the first person to present theories around nursing that we should base our practice on. And that's listed in our foundations book. Dorothea Oram is also listed in your nursing foundations book. So you'll find that information there. So you need to reference. And then for these 1, 2, 3, 4, I think Hildegard Peplau perhaps is in there too. Maybe not. But 1, 2, 3, 4, you'll have to do your own research about these nursing theorists and find the same information that you've been able to find in your books for these two and apply it to these 4. Okay. We only want a couple of sentences, 2 to 3 sentences for each theorist. Okay. How have they contributed to the development of nursing theory? Okay. And don't forget your references. And question 12, how might you incorporate one of the above theoretical frameworks into your care of an elderly patient with dementia? So we've started to learn about the needs of a patient with dementia. So what we want you to do is just pick one of these theories, and you might say, I really like the way Dorothea Oram has looked at the way you might care for people, and applying her nursing theory to an elderly patient who has dementia. This is what this might look like. Okay. So what are the things you might do? They have suggestions as to how you might go about your nursing practice, and pick one that you think might be really good to use when caring for an elderly patient with dementia. And then you'll be done.